Ever notice how the person who cares least in any interaction tends to hold the most power? This isn't coincidence, it's psychological leverage at work. Welcome to the art of psychological distance, where I'm about to reveal why Machiavelli's centuries-old wisdom might be the key to unlocking magnetic fascination in others. Most people get this entirely backwards. They chase, they overinvest, they reveal too much, too soon. But what if I told you that the space between you and others isn't something to eliminate, but rather a powerful tool to cultivate? The most captivating people throughout history understood a counterintuitive truth. Emotional detachment doesn't push people away, it pulls them closer. When you stop desperately seeking validation, you become the rare prize others compete for. Think about the last person who fascinated you. Did they show all their cards at once? Or was there an element of mystery that kept drawing you back, wanting more? Today, I'm breaking down exactly how to create that irresistible pull by mastering psychological distance. Not as manipulation, but as a realistic understanding of human nature. By the end of this video, you'll know why emotional investment should flow toward you rather than from you, and how this simple shift transforms every relationship in your life. Number 1, the fascination gap principle. Have you ever met someone who seemed to know something you didn't? Someone who carried themselves with quiet confidence that made you wonder what made them so secure? In those moments, you likely felt a strange urge to figure them out, to bridge whatever invisible gap existed between your understanding and theirs. This isn't random. It's human psychology at work, and today I'm going to show you how to harness it. Most people approach relationships backward. They try desperately to be interesting. They talk more, share more, reveal more, essentially chasing others' approval and attention. But what happens when you chase something? It runs away. This is the fundamental paradox of human connection that most never grasp. The truth is, fascination doesn't work that way. True fascination emerges from space, not closeness. It grows in the gap between what someone knows about you and what they want to know. This space creates tension, the good kind, that keeps minds engaged and curiosity alive. This brings us to our first principle out of 5, the fascination gap principle. Instead of trying so hard to be interesting, create the space for others to become interested in you. When you deliberately maintain what I call the fascination gap, a calculated psychological distance, you trigger others' natural desire to close that gap themselves. Think about the last truly engrossing book you couldn't put down. What kept you turning pages wasn't getting all the answers up front. It was the gradual revelation, the controlled withholding of information that kept you engaged. This works because humans are hardwired to solve puzzles. When everything is revealed at once, our brains categorize and move on. But partial information, that creates cognitive tension our minds want to resolve. Implementing this principle is surprisingly simple. Start by speaking 20% less in conversations. Let short, comfortable silences develop. When asked direct questions about yourself, answer truthfully but incompletely. Give accurate information that hints at deeper layers without revealing everything. Notice how people respond. They'll ask follow-up questions. They'll listen more carefully to what you do say. They'll begin investing effort in understanding you, which is exactly what fascination looks like in practice. The key is balance. This isn't about being mysterious for its own sake or playing mind games. It's about understanding that human interest thrives in the space between knowing and wanting to know. Master the fascination gap and watch as people who previously scrolled past you suddenly can't look away. This single principle flips the dynamic from you seeking attention to others freely giving it, creating a magnetic pull that traditional advice about showing interest simply can't match. Number 2, the delayed revelation strategy. When was the last time you met someone and within minutes knew their entire life story? Their political views, relationship history, career ambitions, and deepest insecurities, all laid out like items on a clearance rack? How did you feel afterward? If you're like most people, you felt one thing, nothing much at all. This common mistake happens everywhere. People revealing everything about themselves all at once, thinking transparency builds connection. But what if I told you this approach kills fascination before it can even begin? Consider any great work of art. A masterful painting doesn't reveal its full depth at first glance. A brilliant novel doesn't expose its entire plot in the opening chapter. Instead, they reveal themselves layer by layer, rewarding continued attention with new discoveries. This brings us to principle number 2 of 5, the delayed revelation strategy. Most people reveal their full personality immediately, leaving nothing new to discover. The solution? Learn to strategically unfold your layers like chapters in a compelling book. By spacing out personal revelations, you create a sequence of small discoveries that keeps others intellectually and emotionally engaged far longer than total transparency ever could. Think about how streaming services release their best shows, often not all at once, but episode by episode, creating anticipation, discussion, and engagement that lasts weeks instead of a single weekend binge. They understand the psychology of sustained interest. Implementing this strategy is straightforward, but requires patience. Begin by categorizing aspects of your personality and experiences into different levels of intimacy. Reserve your most interesting stories, profound insights, and unique perspectives for later interactions. In early conversations, be genuine but selective. Share enough to establish authenticity without emptying your entire vault of experiences. When you sense connection building, introduce a slightly deeper layer of yourself, a thought-provoking opinion, a meaningful story, a hidden passion. This creates a powerful pattern. Connection, revelation, deeper connection, new revelation. Each disclosure becomes a reward for emotional investment, training others to associate spending time with you with discovering something valuable and new. Remember, mystery isn't about being fake or creating false personas. It's about understanding that human beings value what they discover, gradually more than what's freely given all at once. The most fascinating people you know are likely those you're still learning about, even years into knowing them. They've mastered this principle, perhaps instinctively. Now you can apply it deliberately, transforming yourself from an open book that's quickly read and shelved to a multi-layered experience others want to keep exploring. With the delayed revelation strategy, you don't just hold attention, you create anticipation for every future interaction. Who wouldn't want that kind of magnetic presence? Number 3, the inverse validation method. Think about the last time you really wanted someone's approval. Maybe it was a boss, a date, or even just someone cool you admired. Remember that feeling? That slight anxiety, the careful monitoring of their reactions, the subtle adjustments to your behavior to win their favor. Now flip that scenario. Have you ever been the person whose approval others clearly wanted? Notice the difference in how that feels. This fundamental dynamic, who's seeking validation from whom, shapes every human interaction more than most realize. And today, I'm going to show you how to completely transform it. We've been taught backwards our whole lives. Common wisdom says to validate others, show interest, give compliments. None of this is necessarily wrong, but it places you in the position of the validation giver, not the validation receiver. And there's a crucial power difference between these positions. This leads us to our third principle of 5, the inverse validation method. Typical advice tells you to validate others for connection. The inverse approach is far more powerful. Position yourself as the validator rather than the validation seeker. When others sense you're evaluating rather than seeking approval, They instinctively work harder to earn your genuine interest, completely reversing the power dynamic. This isn't about becoming arrogant or withholding kindness. It's about recognizing a psychological truth. Humans value what they earn more than what's freely given. Implementing this method requires recalibrating your social reflexes. Start by becoming aware of your validation-seeking behaviors, the excessive nodding, the constant agreement, the overlapping at jokes, the eager filling of silences. These subtle behaviors signal to others that you're the one investing more emotionally. Instead, adopt the mindset of thoughtful evaluation. When someone shares an opinion, don't rush to agree. Take a moment, consider it genuinely, then respond authentically, even if that means measured disagreement. When someone tells a story, listen attentively but respond based on the actual content, not the perceived need for approval. Practice giving validation when it's genuinely warranted, not preemptively. A single, well-timed, specific compliment means infinitely more than a dozen generic ones. Quality over quantity transforms you from someone dispensing cheap validation to someone whose approval carries real weight. Watch what happens when you make this shift. People will become more engaged, more authentic, more invested in your interactions. They'll work harder to present their genuine best selves rather than what they think you want to see. The inverse validation method creates a fascinating paradox. By becoming more selective with your validation, you actually foster deeper, more authentic connections. People intuitively understand the difference between earned appreciation and empty flattery, and they value the former infinitely more. Master this principle, and you'll notice people becoming increasingly invested in your opinion, your time, and your attention. The validation current will reverse, flowing toward you rather than from you, creating the psychological foundation for genuine fascination. Number 4, the calculated absence technique. Have you ever noticed how some people seem more valuable when they're not around? That colleague who's always available gets taken for granted, while the one who's occasionally unreachable suddenly becomes essential. The friend who responds instantly to every message versus the one whose replies feel like rare gems. There's something happening here that most people miss entirely. Today's society preaches constant connection, always available, always responsive, always present. But what if this approach is fundamentally flawed? What if presence, when strategically limited, becomes exponentially more powerful? This brings us to our 4th principle of 5, the calculated absence technique. Most try to increase presence to maintain relationships. Instead, master the art of strategic absence, not just physical, but emotional and attentional absence at key moments. This creates what psychologists call variable reward patterns that strengthen connection far more effectively than constant availability. To understand why this works, we need to look at the science. The strongest behavioral patterns are formed not through consistent rewards, but through unpredictable ones. It's why social media is addictive. You never know which scroll will bring that dopamine hit. It's why gambling hooks people. The uncertainty creates anticipation that consistent winning never could. Implementing this technique requires both confidence and restraint. Start with communication patterns. Instead of being instantly available to everyone all the time, introduce deliberate, unpredictable delays in your responses. Not to play games, but to break the expectation of constant access. In conversations, practice attentional absence. Rather than maintaining unwavering focus on others, allow your attention to occasionally drift and return. This subtle shift creates micro moments where others must re-engage you, subtly training them to work for your attention. Even emotionally, calculated absence is powerful. Being consistently supportive is valuable, but being selectively supportive makes your support feel like a significant achievement when received. The key is unpredictability within reason. If you're never available, you're not creating fascination, you're creating frustration. The sweet spot is being present enough to maintain connection while absent enough to create value in your presence. Think of yourself as a limited resource. When something is constantly available, its perceived value diminishes automatically. When access fluctuates, each moment of connection becomes more valuable simply because it's less guaranteed. This technique requires the most finesse of all we've discussed. It isn't about playing mind games or being deliberately inconsiderate. It's about understanding that human psychology responds to contrast. Presence means more when it follows absence. Attention means more when it isn't guaranteed. And connection feels deeper when it requires even minimal effort. Master calculated absence and watch how your social and professional value increases. People don't appreciate constant sunshine. They notice the sun most when it emerges from behind clouds. Become that brilliant, occasionally obscured light, and you'll create a fascinating contrast that draws others toward you with surprising intensity. Number 5. The emotional investment reversal. Have you ever found yourself thinking constantly about someone who barely seems to think about you? Or noticed how the moment you start caring deeply about someone's opinion, your confidence around them mysteriously evaporates? This imbalance isn't random. It's the result of a psychological principle that silently governs human connections. We're about to explore perhaps the most powerful concept in this entire video, one that underpins all the others we've discussed so far. Think of emotional investment like a seesaw. When one person invests heavily, constantly thinking about the other, adjusting their behavior to please them, seeking their approval, the balance shifts. The overinvestor sits at the bottom, looking up at the underinvestor who now occupies the psychological high ground. This brings us to our 5th and final principle, the emotional investment reversal. The person who invests most emotionally holds the least power. Learn to recognize when you're overinvesting and implement the emotional investment reversal. Specific techniques to subtly shift the investment balance until others begin pursuing your approval rather than the reverse, creating genuine fascination rather than fleeting interest. The first step is honest self-assessment. Are you the one always initiating contact? Do you find yourself overthinking your interactions with certain people? Do you regularly adjust your opinions or behavior to align with theirs? These are symptoms of emotional overinvestment. The solution isn't to become cold or distant. Rather, it's about recalibrating your emotional economy. Start investing more in yourself and your independent interests. When you have a rich internal life that doesn't depend on specific others' validation, you naturally become more fascinating. Next, practice controlled emotional withdrawal where appropriate. If you notice you're overinvested, deliberately redirect some of that energy back to yourself. Reduce contact frequency slightly. Shorten interactions occasionally. Create space that allows the other person to notice your absence and potentially move toward you. The most powerful technique is what I call attention recycling. When you catch yourself obsessing over someone's opinion or approval, immediately channel that exact same energy into a personal project or goal. This doesn't just distract you, it literally transforms wasted emotional energy into personal growth, which ironically makes you more attractive to others. Watch for the subtle signs that the investment balance is shifting. The other person initiating contact more frequently, them asking more questions about you and your life, them becoming more accommodating to your preferences. These indicate the emotional investment reversal is working. This principle requires patience. Investment balances don't shift overnight, but when they do shift, the change can be dramatic, often resulting in the other person becoming significantly more invested in earning your attention and approval than they were before. The beauty of this approach is that it creates genuine fascination rather than manipulation. When you're less emotionally dependent on specific outcomes with others, You show up more authentically. You speak more honestly. You act with greater confidence. These qualities naturally draw others toward you without games or pretense. Master the emotional investment reversal, and you'll never again find yourself in the disempowered position of caring too much while receiving too little in return. Instead, you'll create the space for others to move toward you, invest in you, and genuinely value their connection with you. As we come to the end of our exploration into psychological distance, let's reflect on what we've uncovered. We've learned that fascination isn't created through desperate connection, but through strategic space. We've discovered that revealing yourself gradually creates more engagement than immediate transparency. We've seen how becoming the validator rather than the validation seeker completely transforms your interactions. We've explored how calculated absence creates value in your presence. And finally, how balancing emotional investment creates genuine fascination rather than fleeting interest. These principles aren't about manipulation. They're about understanding human nature at its core. By applying them with integrity, you create the conditions for deeper, more meaningful connections where others truly value your presence, your attention, and your approval. The art of psychological distance isn't about pushing people away. It's about creating the perfect space where genuine attraction can flourish. Master these principles and watch as the emotional current in your relationships begins to flow in your direction, creating fascination that lasts. The next video the algorithm chose for you isn't random. It's your next tactical upgrade. Click it now and continue your silent ascent.